To commemorate the 50th anniversary of the Department of Homeland Security, we caught up with Dan Sutherland and Shariq Zafar at Homeland Security's Office of Civil Rights and Civil Liberties to talk about the past 5 years and what's next. Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Thank you.
When you look back, how does it make you feel now? I mean, do you think that DHS achieved the targets that they had set when they started out 5 years back? Do you think that they've achieved that?
Well, I think the country is a lot more secure than it was before 9/11. I mean, there have been a lot of things that have taken place, like making sure the cockpit doors are more secure, having screeners at airports, screening cargo before it comes into the country. A lot of just basic things like that that we've been able to do over the last few years. There's absolutely no doubt that we're a lot more secure than we were before 9/11.
Why do you think there's a negative image about DHS when we talk about the international community, despite the fact that you guys are trying to do the right thing and it's pretty much needed here and outside America, but still there's this stereotype image about DHS. Why do you think that is?
Well, I mean, we're an agency that predominantly works on security issues. So, we evaluate visas, for example, whether people can come or go, and that always puts you in a bad position. Our job is not necessarily to be popular, it's to do the right thing. But I think that there's a lot of things that the Department of Homeland Security has done that have been well received internationally. The cargo screening initiatives that they've done, the Secretary spent a lot of time in Europe and other places. We have spent a lot of time in our office trying to build relationships with Muslim communities and leaders in Europe, Canada, other places. So I think there's a lot that we have done that has been well received internationally too.
There was a group of people from Europe yesterday at the Woodrow Wilson Center talking about European Muslims and the outreach program that Europe has exercised, and they were criticizing the U.S. that U.S. should follow what Europe is doing. But I think the U.S. took the lead in that. Why do you think there's this impression that U.S. is behind in outreach programs?
That would be a false impression. The Muslim community in the United States, the Pakistani American community, the South Asian community, is an extremely prosperous and successful community. And their connections to the government have been long-standing. We have open access. They make contributions in business, medicine, government. So we have a very strong base from which to work. In terms of outreach, I think maybe it's not known as well as it should be, but I think there's a lot of good efforts that have taken place from our office, the FBI, others in government, state and local governments, to really connect with Muslims in America and make them know that what has traditionally been true, their involvement with government, is still what we want to happen.
What do you think is the role of reaching out to minority communities within a society to secure a homeland?
Well, the important point is that everybody in the country feel part of the Homeland Security effort. You can't have for example, you couldn't have the governor of a state say, well, we're going to go our own way. I mean, it has to be a coordinated effort. So that also applies then to minority communities. They need to feel part of the Homeland Security effort, that their ideas are valued, that their participation is valued, that people within their communities know how to prepare, what kind of goods to have. If a hurricane hits, it hits everybody. If a terrorist strike hits, everybody's affected by it. So all communities need to have a stake in it and feel like they're valued in trying to figure out how do we proceed in the security effort.
Do you think you've been successful considering the past 5 years?
We've made a lot of success, but we're in the early stages of the game. But we've had a lot of success, I think, in working with people. Particularly, we've focused on 6 different cities. But there are somewhere between 3 and 7 million Muslims in America, and they're spread out geographically all over the country. So we've got a lot of work to do. There's a lot of people out there who have contributions to make that we need to draw into the effort.
I know the Pentagon and CENTCOM have been thinking about training people in Pakistan in counter terrorism and counterintelligence gathering, and there was this news about DHS doing something like that. Is there any effort to train intelligence community in Pakistan and just the way DHS is working in the U.S.?
Right. That is not in our role. I would just say that Pakistani Americans have been making real contributions in trying to build good relationships and understanding between people in our government and in our country with Pakistan. And that has been very successful. We've seen that in Washington in a number of big and small ways the contributions that Pakistani Americans are making to build stability there and to help our government better understand how to relate to South Asia.
Where do you see DHS in the next 5 years?
Well, I think we're going to really have to redouble our efforts to make Muslims in America and the West feel that the security effort is thoughtful and respectful of their rights. I think that's a really key element of what we need to be doing over the upcoming few years. We've laid a good groundwork, but we have a lot of work there yet to go. Obviously, there's going to be continuing efforts to try to understand better who's coming and going from the country, a lot of security efforts like that. But I think for our part of it, we really want to make sure that we're undertaking our security programs in ways that respect people's rights and liberties, and that they know that as well, that that's communicated to them.
Last question. Keeping in view what happened in Oklahoma, Timothy McVeigh's story, do you think Homeland Security should just be concentrating on Muslims?
No, absolutely not, and we don't. No, the focus is on keeping the country secure, and that the country can be damaged by hurricanes like Hurricane Katrina. So natural disasters or man-made disasters, and man-made situations come from all different types of people, groups, single-issue groups, maybe people who are mentally unstable, all sorts of different reasons, and we have to be and really are focused on a wide range of issues and concerns that people have.
Is there anything you'd like to say to millions of Muslims watching you? A lot of them thinking that Homeland Security was established to attack Muslims, and I don't think there's information outside about, you know, how you guys are helping out in the hurricane and other natural disasters. Is there anything that you'd like to say out to the 21 million people watching you?
Well, it's really, really important for Muslims in America, in the West, and really around the world to know that the U.S. government is working hard, quietly but hard, to involve them in the effort, to have for them to be engaged, to participate. We're working on a lot of different projects that try to ask for Muslims to give their best ideas and opinions. We're working hard on trying to resolve civil rights complaints and concerns. We go to court and sue people. We tackle policy issues. So this is a really important message that we want Muslims to understand. Get involved with government. There's open doors. There are people here who are trying to work to try to involve you and engage you, and that's what we really hope will be a message that people will get.
And do you think that's one of the biggest difference between the European counterparts and the U.S. counterparts, that no one's banning headscarves in America?
Absolutely. I mean, in our Justice Department, this is very, very little known. Our Justice Department has sued state and local governments who have tried to stop people, either in employment settings or school settings, from wearing the hijab or some sort of religious head covering. When I tell Muslims that in Europe, they're just shocked because their governments are trying to stop that from happening. So I think the idea that America is very difficult on Muslims, there's a lot more context to this and background, and that's one thing that we want people to know, that there's a lot of work to be done for sure, but there's a lot of good groundwork that has already been laid here in America.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
I would like to start off with asking you if you know anything about what happened last night in New York City. What can you comment on that?
You know, I've read some news reports, and we know that there was an explosion outside of a military recruiting facility in New York, and fortunately nobody was hurt. It's a little early to make any assessments. We're just glad that nobody was hurt, and obviously some people who resort to violence to intimidate are people that frankly need to be investigated and prosecuted. So I'm hopeful that the authorities will get a lead or a suspect soon and will take appropriate action.
Do you think it was a terrorist attack?
Again, it's too early to speculate right now, but I know it's it's certainly a violent attack and something that we need to take very seriously.
When we talk about DHS, there's this image that DHS is an organization that was established to handle the Muslim issues,
Right.
And it's an attack against the Muslims, the racial profiling and all of that. Do you agree with that?
Well, no, I don't. I've obviously been working for the department for a couple of years now, and I think one thing, the struggle is that we've only been around for 5 years, and as you know, today is our 5-year anniversary, and so we've been spending the majority of our time building our institutions and really, working to protect the country. And I think now we have an opportunity to start explaining to the American public and perhaps even the international community, okay, what is our purpose? For example, the customs, trade, immigration are our core programs, but we also focus on disaster relief. We also focus on securing the economy, things like that. So I think now we'll have a better chance, hopefully going forward, to sort of start explaining, what our role is in the United States government. But the reality is we are a security agency, and our primary mission is to protect and secure our country from attacks, natural disasters, etc. So that's something that we're going to continue to do. We're going to do it with pride, and we'll stay true to our purpose. But I think there's always room for improvement when it comes to explaining to the American public what we're exactly doing, and also to members of the international community who may be impacted by our policies and procedures.
One of the interesting things that I came across was this thing about cultural competence. As much as it's going to help Muslims integrate into Western societies, do you think at the same time it's helping the Western society learn about other cultures?
Well, I think that the job in government is to be professional and to carry out the mission. And our primary mission is to protect the country. Now, oftentimes people may have an issue with our policy. For example, how we screen people or certain regulations we impose. Now, sometimes the issue isn't so much the policy, but the implementation of policy, and that deals with how familiar is, in the context of cultural competency, how familiar is a particular government employee with travelers from a certain part of the world. Let's say, for example, the Arab or Muslim world. Now, we don't call it sensitivity training because it's being sensitive is surely important, but our primary focus is that our employees be professional, and the vast majority are very, very professional. But whenever we can, we like to give them training, education, background on travelers from the Muslim world, for example, who may be carrying a copy of the Quran. Now, if you're carrying a copy of the Quran in your checked luggage, that doesn't mean you're a terrorist. It means probably the person's Muslim. And it's considered a holy book for Muslims, so you should, treat it appropriately. By the same token, some, though not all, but many Muslim women cover their head. Now, we all know that, and it's important that our professionals, and they all, for the most part, know that now. Well, what type of criteria, when you can, when it's appropriate, what can you do when you need to search someone who's wearing the hijab? Things like that it's not so much about being polite or being sensitive. It's about being professional. And when you tell people this is part of your job, that it's about being professional, chances are they pay attention more. And so that's the whole idea of cultural competency, building this idea of professionalism, from the very top to the very bottom parts of the government.
Do you think DHS has been successful in reaching out to the people, day-to-day people, everyday life people, that, hey, for example, I have this South Asian color, but I was never pulled over, never stopped at the airports, never went through any of these things that people talk about.
Well, the reality is that when you go through an airport, and let's say nothing happens, and you go through, and that's not something you're going to report. Right? Nor should you, frankly. That's something that's ordinary. But the people that have had issues when traveling, that's something that they would report. And frankly, I'm at the Office for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties, so I would encourage people, if they believe that their rights have been violated, to file a complaint with our office. But I think the reality is the good news doesn't get reported. Now, you asked me, sort of to measure how successful we've been. I think there's still a lot of things that we can do. I don't think it's appropriate for us to sort of rest on our laurels and say that we've been very successful. I think the reality is that we've established the department. It's been 5 years. We've had a fair amount of progress. For example, for the last 2 years, Americans who've been going to perform the Hajj in Saudi Arabia, we've trained all of our officers at airports in the security services at airports to expect that people will be traveling to the Hajj. Many of them will be dressed in white. When they come back, they may be carrying Zamzam, holy water. And in light of the recent liquid restrictions that that the Transportation Security Administration has imposed, it's important that our officials know that this is water that's revered. So it's probably better don't pour it out, but just let people know in advance that they should put it in the checked luggage. Now that's just one example, but that's the type of issues that we're struggling with and that we're grappling. And the idea is that we want travelers from the Muslim world, from the Arab world, from South Asia to come. We need them. And so whatever we can do to help improve the cultural competency of our officers to make their jobs easier and to improve the travel of people from all parts of the world, and I think that's something that we need to continue to do. And I'm proud that we've made some progress, but I think we need to keep working on these issues, and I look forward to staying with the department for the foreseeable future and making sure things improve.
Can we say that there's better awareness because you were able to reach out to the people within the department?
Well, I think it's been a team effort, and I think that the department every year there's improvements. Just the idea of starting a government agency, building it from scratch and combining all these different organizations and entities. It's a very serious undertaking. It's not something that just happened overnight. And I think, again, 5 years it's an important time to reflect. It's an important time for us to look back and see what we've accomplished, but also it's equally important for us to say, okay, what remains, what tasks remain, and for us to, acknowledge 5 years, but then get right back to work tomorrow.
If we talk about terrorism threats in particular, do you think that it's also the responsibility of people? I mean, I don't mind being checked if somebody has an issue with me.
Well, the whole idea is that we need to be strategic about this. If we're just pulling over people because they look a certain way or they practice a certain belief, that's not strategic, right? And frankly, it's wrong and it's unconstitutional. But by the same token, if we have intelligence that we're looking for a particular threat, perhaps it's someone that looks like me, perhaps it's someone that looks completely different, then we have to act on that intelligence. And that's the whole idea. We need to be strategic about that. And for the most part, we are. Now, there are times when people feel that their rights have been violated. In this country, there's an infrastructure in place. They can file a complaint with my office. They can file a complaint in other offices. These complaints get investigated. So I'm not, as a civil rights lawyer, I certainly want people to stand up for their rights. But by the same token, they should know that there is a legal infrastructure in place. The Department of Justice has racial profiling guidelines. The Department of Homeland Security has adopted those guidelines. So it's not that something, any perception that Muslims or Arabs or South Asians or people of any ethnicity are just being pulled over left and right in the United States, it's just false. It doesn't reflect reality.
What if I'm at the airport and I'm sweating a lot and I'm a little excited? I've got this anxiety, I've got a bad stomach or something like that, and somebody sees me, will they pull me over?
Again, if we were to do that, if that was the criteria, we would not be protecting our country. That's simply just not the case. Now, there's going to be times when people are going to be pulled over at an airport, and that's part of our mission to protect the country. But it's a lot more sophisticated than that. It's a lot more about making sure we understand what the threats are and then taking appropriate actions. And by the same token, if people feel that their rights are being violated or that that they were profiled either because of their race or their religion, there are steps that they can take to file those complaints, and I encourage them to do so. Let's
talk about the award, the annual Secretary's Award. Why was it given to you?
Well, it was the Secretary's Award for Excellence. Every year, the Secretary has an award ceremony, and the award I received was, to be very frank, a team award. We have a great team here at the department, Office for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties. My boss, in particular, Dan Sutherland, has really set the vision for the office about, and really, stress the need to engage with Arab, Muslim, Sikh, South Asian Americans in a way that's really, frankly, never been done before to such a level in the government. And I think his vision, and we've got a really good team of some young policy advisors, have really nationwide with our resources, really built this outreach effort. And I think the Secretary was recognizing us as a team when he gave us that award.
Positive critics have been saying that a lot of the stuff that you guys do over here could benefit, let's say, the intelligence community in Pakistan. Are there any plans for DHS helping the Pakistani intelligence community train in counterterrorism?
Look, I'm a civil rights lawyer in the Department of Homeland Security. I would have absolutely no idea if such plans existed. But again, I would tell you, in terms of Pakistan, the one thing that we can say is we have a regular and continuous interaction with Pakistani Americans. We meet with them on issues to discuss civil rights issues, to discuss foreign policy issues. And, by and large, our Pakistani American, indeed our broader South Asian community, Indian Americans, who originate from Sri Lanka, are very successful. They're very engaged. And frankly, we need their help. and they've been very, very anxious to meet with us, talk with us, give us guidance, and when appropriate, give us some criticisms and feedback as well. And we welcome the relationship that we've established, and we're hopeful that in the years we can strengthen and deepen these relationships.
Critics have been saying that U.S. should learn from how the European community is handling issues of Muslims. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think we can always learn, and we should also share best practices for engagement, for training. Now, that being said, I'd point out that whereas some countries in Europe and other parts of the world have been banning the headscarf, the United States government has been going to court to protect a little girl. Actually, there's a little girl in Oklahoma who now gets to wear her hijab because of the United States government. Also, we have Muslims in America are very successful. If you look at polls and studies in terms of the national average when it comes to education, home ownership, jobs, education, they're much higher than the average. So we think, this idea that Muslims need to integrate better in the United States, they already have. They've done a good job about it, and I think that's to their credit, but I think it's also to the credit, and I'm biased as an American, but I think the American system of government, the American society that values hard work, responsibility, the values of rule of law, I think that deserves credit as well, because I think, as our secretary says, in the United States, there are no guests. Everybody's welcome. Everybody's equal. Once you're a citizen, you're a citizen, and you have the same rights and responsibilities as everybody else. And we have no standard for different people who've been here, haven't been here as long. Everybody has this, the same opportunities. And when that doesn't happen, when rights are violated, when issues arise, there's an infrastructure in place, there's a rule of law in place, so those things can be remedied.
Do you think there's a lot that people outside America could learn from DHS in terms of community outreach?
Let me say two things. First of all, I think it'd be important for more people around the world know what we're doing to engage with ethnic and religious communities. And it's not just Muslims. We meet with the Amish community to discuss their civil rights issues. We meet with the Sikh community. We meet with conservative Christians, with the Jewish community. We meet with a variety of different communities. We meet with the disabled community to make sure that their needs are accounted for in the context of natural disasters and hurricane planning, to make sure that next time there's a hurricane, God forbid, that there will be there'll be ramps in place so people who are in wheelchairs can have access to facilities. So we meet with lots of different communities. So I think, but with regard to outreach to Arab and Muslim and South Asian communities, I think the international community would benefit from learning, that we value these members of the American community, and that we actually have initiatives geared towards them to make sure that they understand the constitutional protections that are afforded to all Americans. They know how to file a complaint. They know that they have job positions available for which they can apply just like anybody else. Now, the second question you asked is, can the international community learn from what we're doing? And I think the first, what I'd have to say is that each country has its own unique legal system. Each country has its population. But I think broadly speaking, this idea that you should reach out to members of ethnic and religious communities, that part of government is making sure that you protect the rule of law, but that you also protect civil rights, what is internationally called human rights. That's something I think all members of the civilized world can agree on. And to the extent that perhaps we can learn from them, maybe there's some parts of what we do that others can learn from. But to have that exchange of ideas, I think, is important. And to the extent that there are opportunities, we welcome participating in them.
Thank you so much for your time.